Michaela, thank you so much for joining us, for doing this video recording for us today. I think it'll be a really beneficial thing for early interventionists all around the state. First, for the audience, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a background. So, Michaela participates in one of our professional development trainings, and she really shared a very unique perspective coming from a parent who had a child go through early intervention recently. So I'm going to ask you, Michaela, if you don't mind just going ahead and introducing yourself, like your role, and giving us a little bit more information about that perspective that you also carry with you.
I'm Micaela Morgan. I work with the Infant Toddler Connection of Hampton and Newport News. I actually have a dual role. I'm a service coordinator and a developmental service provider, and I've been with Hampton Newport News for about 4 years now. 20 months ago, I had a little boy, and he has since gone through the early intervention program. He's actually still receiving one therapy, but was just discharged from another after a year of services. So I'm still in the thick of it, but I've had some interesting thoughts, and I feel really lucky to have gone through and experienced both sides of the program.
Yes. And what's so fascinating about that, and we get really excited every time we have a parent in a professional development training because you have such a unique perspective. And that's really something that we just want to share with everyone else to really open their eyes and really help them be a little bit more empathetic and understanding to families so we can better really support them and grow in our own process and how we're serving families and supporting them. So, what I would love for you to do, I'm just going to open it up and ask you to go ahead and just kind of share some of your experiences with us, really holding that perspective in mind. And what's really unique about that, I think, is that you have that background in early intervention, but you're kind of going through it too. So, you have a little bit more knowledge than parents that don't have that background in early intervention, but yet you still probably have your own feelings about certain things. So, I'd love for you to just kind of share.
For sure. Yeah. It's funny because it's almost like it's an advantage, obviously, because some of the things are less, they're more expected, they're more anticipated, but other things I feel like it can be a disadvantage too, because it's almost like I know too much or I'm getting in my own way. So I think I got into the program. We started noticing, little differences about my son around 3 months, and we kind of did what all parents do, and they research and they Google and they call mom up and talk
Dr.
to
Google.
Dr. Google and Dr. Mom, and call the doctor, and we're like, of course I'm like, hey, can you look at this video? And to my coworkers, like, is this normal? I feel like I've never seen this before. But as a parent with no prior knowledge like that, those resources might not even be available. Those flags might not have even raised. And so parents are just kind of doing the best they can with what they've got available. And I think for us, it kind of became, especially for me, we were at a point where I just wanted to be a mom. I didn't want to be a child development expert. And I felt like it was really hard to separate that out. And even if I didn't do this for a living, I still feel like a lot of parents seek this program so that so that something can be taken off their plate, so that they're not constantly downloading the apps and doing the activities and looking up the checklist and things like that, because they just want to enjoy their baby from not such an objective standpoint.
Yeah. Well, actually, you kind of brought up a couple points. So if I can pause you for a second, I want to jump back to that. So the first thing that you kind of talked about was some of that early identification. So when a family gets referred, obviously they go to multiple resources sometimes, and they might see something. They might feel like, hey, like there's a concern with my child. They might go to the doctor. The doctor might brush them off. You never know like what's going to happen. And so a lot of parents have to be their own advocate. Now, you had that background, and so you have a little bit more knowledge about that. So I'm just kind of curious, like, too, when you first got into like that stage and that process, like, how was that for you, kind of seeking a little bit more support?
It mixed bag. A baby at 3 months, most people that you talk to, especially with who already have their own kids, or especially if you talk to your own parent, they're like, oh, it's fine. So we were brushed off a lot. Closer to him being 6 months, 7 months, we started getting a little bit more traction. But the feeling of thinking that something is wrong, using your mommy gut, your daddy gut, trying to stick to that intuition and being told just wait or it's fine, it's really makes you doubt yourself a lot. And I think that's where we probably lose a lot of potential referrals, because there's not a whole lot of encouragement out there. At least we didn't experience that consistently until he was a little bit older, with teaching parents how to continue advocating for what they are feeling. I mean, they might not have anything tangible, especially parents that don't know the jargon to use with the doctors and know the specialists that are out there that can provide second opinions. For those parents especially, I think it's so important that we have programs like Healthy Families and infant toddler connection and stuff, so that we can teach these parents, like, this is how you continue in the face of doubt, and you just get another opinion and you keep going, and you're the squeaky wheel, and you're the mama, you're the daddy. And when I think back to that question on the IFSP, like, what are your priorities for your child? And everyone almost always says, I just want them to be happy and healthy and develop. And we kind of all are like, yeah, okay, but like, can you be more specific? Because I have to write this down. But when we come back to the core of that, you just, as a parent, you're just like, whatever the road is to get there, somebody please put me on the track, because
Yeah.
I feel like we're kind of spinning off and I don't know how to get back on. So I'm looking for some traction, please.
Right.
So as the babies get older, I think more and more people, professionals, doctors, whatever, start um, taking the concerns of the parents more seriously, which I think is unfortunate, because, like, for example, we missed a very important window for our son getting a helmet because we couldn't get the referral through. And so that it was missed. By the time we finally got it, his skull was hardened. So
Which is so hard, right? Because you
mhm,
work in the field and you found that yourself. Like, that was a huge barrier for you to get services. And I think, sometimes, I mean, I don't know, kind of like when you're talking, I was kind of reflecting back and I was like, man, like maybe like I feel a little guilty too for some of those families where they came in with concerns and I didn't really hold it as high of a priority that they probably did too. And I should have. We really probably just need to make sure that we're fully aware and really hold those concerns that parents have, in the same manner that they do, and value them in the same way. So that's an interesting. Another thing that you said too was just talking about like some of that pressure that you felt like as a parent. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about um, just feeling that pressure of wanting to have fun. Kind of, you said when you're talking about the priorities, like you just want your baby to be healthy and happy, and like you want to have fun, but then you feel like you have to do all these activities with them at the same time. And I think we encounter that a lot with families where they feel torn because you want to help your child grow and develop, but you just want to have fun with them and just enjoy them too.
yeah, and some parents, they may have a background that makes every child is precious, but that makes this miracle the most important thing. And I don't care where we have to go. I don't care who tells me what to do. I just want my baby to be happy and healthy. And we kind of came from that um, cloth too. We were told we would never be able to have kids in 2014, and then lo and behold, we have a son, and we're just like, this is amazing. I don't care what happens. I just want him to be so happy. Um, and then you start noticing things. And so when people ask you, like, well, what is it that you want to do, or what is it that you want to focus on today? That's a huge question. That's like going into like Baskin Robbins and picking a flavor.
Yeah.
And we try as providers we try to ask those huge questions, those open-ended questions, because there are several different answers that can happen. But as a parent, I almost wonder if it would have been easier for me to process had the question been smaller with a few potential answers.
Mm-hmm.
So it got me thinking, like, as a provider, should I be asking, okay, what would you like to do today? What are you guys focusing on? What were challenges this week? Or should I say, okay, so try to coax it along more organically. Last time we practiced this, show me what that looks like, and start more with the observation and that type of thing, and then maybe ask a question. Well, what can we do with this activity today that would get us closer? You know what I mean? It's like not starting with that huge question, because that almost feels like I'm going to say the wrong thing. I don't know if I'm picking the right thing. I don't know if that's comes next on the hierarchy of importance or of physical development. Like I just, and the pressure there with picking the right thing and using your 45 minutes or your 60 minutes the right way,
Well, I think what you're kind of bringing up is not walking in with asking, like, just being the first thing you say, like, hey, how are you doing? Like, so what would you like to work on today?
Yeah.
Like, because that does seem like it's like, hold on, like, let me catch my breath. Let me like get my focus on where we're at today. Let's kind of think about what we were doing before since when we last met, and really kind of cue parents into getting into that mindset too. But I love that idea too. So thank you for sharing that. And I also really love how you shared like your story, that was like your miracle child in a way, and so that's something that you're like, you hold with you, because you're like, like, I didn't think I was going to have this child, and I'm going to do anything I can for him. And I understand, like, that's a lot of pressure that you can give, yourself too, but it's also something for us to remember that all parents have their own story of where they've come from the very beginning of their pregnancy. And those are some things that can really impact how they feel throughout services. And so we have to, figure out how we can best support them and where they're coming from, so we can ultimately really support them and where they're at. Were there any other times that you kind of like felt like that too?
Honestly, this is going to sound super practical, but like when the baby's crying, my amygdala is on fire, and so I can't process what you're asking me or what you're telling me or teaching me. Like, I'm certainly not in a learning threshold when my baby is crying. And so I was thinking, like, next time I ask a family what could be a very difficult question, even though that's not the way it's intended, or I never know what the receiving end is going to be, I might just take the baby, like, just take the baby. I'll give her a snack, or I'll, play with toys or whatever in the same room, and, following all the protocols and everything. But when I'm asking a question that might require some brain power or some thought, and the baby is climbing all over or whatever, I think it might be just helpful for the parent to try and distract and give the parent that space.
Or give them that time.
Give them that time. Like, we always say, like, oh, pause 10 seconds and it feels like 10 minutes, but it's only 10 seconds. Well, for the parent, that 10 seconds might feel like one. Because you're gathering your thoughts. I just got off work. I had to had to go get them from childcare. Got to get them a snack. Oh my God, it's nap time. We're going to push dinner back, whatever the case may be. And it just might take some time to filter through all of the extraneous stuff to get to a point mentally where you're able to, like, process, what is she asking me? Why is she asking me that, instead of just telling me the question or telling me the answer? And what do I actually want to answer? Right. I mean, that's higher level thinking, and you can't do that with a screaming baby.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because I love all the brain-based stuff, and I love, talking about like stress and what that does for you. And that's really what you're talking about. Like, it's a temporarily like stressful situation that parents are placed in. And you're right. Like, when your baby's crying, like, that's your focus. Like, your heart is like pulling towards that child, and that's all you want to do is comfort them. And I think sometimes we're in this weird situation where the parent is kind of following our lead. They don't know what they're allowed to do. Like, can they go in the other room really quick to get their baby a snack or get their baby a bottle? Or, oh, I probably need to change my baby's diaper, but they're just not sure like how much longer they have until the meeting's over. Should they just wait it out? And so it's almost like they're looking for like permission. And I love how you talked about that. Like, let's give them like that break. Let's stop it, pause, like give them that, like, hey, like, let's take a few minutes and let's just get your child settled. Like, let's go make her happy, like get her a snack, whatever it is she needs. And then we'll reconvene after that when she's happy and settled, and that we can really fully engage in this conversation too. Yeah, so that's a great point. I was thinking about the question you were talking about with the priorities too. So I wanted to go back to that for a minute. So that is definitely something that's on the IFSP, and that's a big question. So were you thinking that when we're talking about priorities, to kind of say like, like these are like your main concerns, this is what you were really focused on, what would you really ultimately like to focus on first? Like, if you could prioritize your concerns, what would be your main priority?
Yeah, and I think that conversation mainly probably would come during like goal writing, I think, but I guess more along the lines of when you're talking and interacting with your families, like as a service coordinator, I think subconsciously we can interact in ways that betray our orientation of how we perceive you. And so if that is like, yeah, I know you just want your baby to be happy, then that question might just, okay, moving on. I already knew you were going to say that. I probably already had it filled in. And we don't have, like, it's almost like we don't spend time on that. And so you miss out on an opportunity to get backstories or like, what are your priorities? Well, I want him to eventually be able to go visit grandma. Like, that's not a generic response, but we might miss out on giving the family the opportunity to be able to share that by shutting down the rapport building that can happen there. But then also in our minds as providers, like, we just need to recognize that their job is to be subjective. Their job is to be emotional about this. Their job is to be idealistic. They're the parent. We're supposed to be bringing the objectivity into it. And so together that can be a really good balance and a really great collaboration. But we can't expect parents to list their priorities for their child in an intake situation or in an assessment when they're being thrown so many other things. You're asking someone to prioritize so much in one little thing so that you can check off a box. And it's just,
well, it sounds like, like what you're kind of like getting at too is that you kind of need to make sure that you're really giving each individual family that attention, and you're not just making sure that you're putting them in a box, and so it might take a little bit more exploring. And you are absolutely right, because those goals and those outcomes, that is a great opportunity to kind of bring it up and talk about it again too, especially because sometimes we see like between intake and that time, like their goals and priorities might have changed.
Right.
And so your goals and your outcomes actually have to align with the parents' concerns and priorities. And so we should be bringing it up, and we should be having those conversations and diving a little bit deeper into that. But I like that, really individualizing it, because what we do know is that families don't want to feel like more like just another case that you have.
They don't want to feel like a number.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so we really want to make sure that we're making them feel heard and validated too, and that we see them and their whole family as a unit, and we're here to really support them. So that's great. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about before I move on to my next question?
What's your next question?
Okay.
Am I following line?
This is a great question, I think. I was really curious. So, like, now that you're in it and you have that parent perspective, has anything changed for you in the way that you deliver services to families?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm just a disclaimer, I'm totally still figuring it out. Any therapist that tells you they're not still figuring out is wrong, right? So, I think yes, empathy has been a huge thing that I've come to appreciate a lot more, just from the parents' perspective. And I'll tell you, the IFSP, the assessment in the IFSP was so overwhelming for me. And here's the thing, like, I knew what they were talking about. I'd already done my own assessment on my own kid, like, the nerd, right? I'm like, I already know where he is. And for the most part, it was right on par. And so I already knew what the scores were going to be. I knew what the discrepancies were going to be. I knew what they were saying. I knew the process. I know what's coming next. I couldn't imagine being a parent not knowing that process and just being like, we try really hard to involve parents. Like we give so many opportunities. I think our program is designed, I mean, obviously it's designed to involve and empower and teach and all that, but even still, it's a lot. And I think the thing that makes it hard is that you've just come from hearing something that you didn't want to hear to now let's make a decision about it without any time in between. And I always like think back to how that can be misaligned with like grief counseling, right? Like you need time to process and time to think and retain and chew on it some more, and then you can make a big decision. And I don't know the technicalities of how that can be improved, but that was just a thought I had. So I tried to, as a service coordinator after the assessment now, hey, like, did that all make sense to you? Or what are your thoughts? Do you want me to check back in a couple of days and see how you guys are processing things? Do you have someone that you can talk to about this? That type of thing, just checking in after that huge appointment. To make sure, because I certainly remember after ours, knowing already what I knew, I still was thinking about it days after, like, what did they say? I should have written it down. I'm gonna put it in my phone and send a text to myself, like,
because it's so much information.
It is.
But I think, like we often say, like intake, like the IFSP and the assessment process, like it's a lot of information for families at once. But I think what you're talking about is so much more deeper than that. You're talking about the emotional part of it.
Right.
It's an emotionally draining process for the families. And yes, it's something that we have to go through with them. They don't feel like that at the sessions all the time, because it's not something where, even if you know that your child has a delay, even if it's a significant one or a mild one, it can just be hard for them to be in that position to hear it again, and really just take it all in. You're right, they're grieving, they're going through that emotional process. And I think, it's okay sometimes after the assessment, if maybe the parents need to take a break and say, like, do you want to continue on through the IFSP, or would you like us to come back at another time? Obviously, it's a lot more work for us if we were to have to do that. But I mean, it's something that's, to think about. Some parents might not want to. They'd be like, no, let's go ahead because I want to get services. Right? Yeah, like I'd rather be done now. But giving them those moments to process, at least throughout that time, like, hey, like let's just take like 10 minutes, let's take a 10-minute break. Not even just for the baby. Like maybe we just need to take a 10-minute break for the parents.
I also think what compounds the effect of the emotional toll that it takes is if you've got a parent who's been pushing, having to justify their concerns over and over and over, 10 ways to Sunday, and then they hear someone confirm it. That's like, that came out of someone else's mouth. So I'm not crazy, one, and it must be true, two, and that sucks, three. And so, you just never know the journey that the family has been on to get to that appointment. And so I think handling it more gingerly and with more empathy, and instead of like, oh my God, 3 appointments today, let's just come up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just love that point of view that you're bringing. And you're right. It's so important to make sure that because we have back-to-back visits. We have all this paperwork that we're thinking, okay, like I need to get this signed and this signed and this signed. We need to make sure we go over this, and we got to talk about transition still. Like there's just so many different steps that we're thinking in our head that maybe sometimes like we're almost overwhelmed ourselves because we're like, you know, trying to juggle a lot of things. But we have to really take that moment to also slow ourselves down, to pause and to really reflect and be aware of where we are. Because I love how you said that every family has their own journey. That's just beautiful, because they are like, we don't know where they've been, and it's truly something that's individual to each family. And so we need to make sure that we are being respectful of that. And I think though, if we could do that and do it in such a beautiful way from the very beginning, that relationship with that family will just grow throughout, where we don't have to really keep feeling like, you know, like we're still building rapport, we're still building this relationship, because we're really just acknowledging how important and valuable they are, and that we're acknowledging their story from the very beginning too.
Yeah. And I think that you behave in such a way that reaffirms what you believe. And so as a provider, you really have to believe, like, this family's appointment might be one of 4 or 5 that you've got, 2 or 3, whatever. But to them, you're one appointment. You're the day that they've been waiting for. You're the, you know, that's the appointment today. And so you have to come from it from a perspective like, I believe this family, this is meaningful to this family. I believe I can have an impact on this family. And I believe that, you know, together we can move this train along. That we don't have to stop here, but we can move it along. But we behave in ways that reaffirm what we believe. And so that's where it has to start. You have to kind of shift your approach to it, I think, as a provider and a provider of early intervention. You know what I mean?
I love that. So what I want to do next is I want to get into a little bit of the coaching interaction style.
Sure.
And how really that's been for you. So just share a little bit more about like your perspective, because you know what coaching is, and we talk about, you know, how hard coaching can be sometimes. And so I'd love to hear just from a parent perspective, like how was that for you?
Yes. Okay. So I really loved the freedom of, I knew that I was in charge. I knew that these people were here to support me and what I felt was a priority for our family. But sometimes what would you like to do today? I just want to be like, I would like to cry. And so can you take this off my plate, please? And so I think knowing that parents are not just a one size fits all, they're not consistent from day to day. Nobody is. So you may have a parent that you're like, oh, this parent is always on it. You know, they always have an idea of what to do. And they might not that day, and that would be totally fine to give them an inch, you know, here. So I see that you're, you know, this is a kind of a crazy day. It's kind of chaotic, whatever. I thought we could blah, 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 blah. How does that sound to you? How would that impact your day tonight? You know what I mean? So understanding that I'm a different person from day to day. Parents are different people from day to day, you know. It was nice because my providers recognized that. We had services through some really tough times, and so there were certainly days where I'm like, I didn't do anything. I'm so sorry. Like I did it the first day, and then we got blah 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 blah, and you know, you hear it all the time, but it's a true thing. It happens.
Well, I think so, but you like talked from the very beginning about the pressure that you felt.
Yeah.
And like if you feel like you have to do something, then that can feel like a little bit more pressure. And not certainly that your providers even made you feel like that at all. But maybe they didn't, you know, like maybe we need to find a better fit, like where it's something that just is more naturally occurring for you, or it doesn't feel like it's like extra work, you know, too, because that's the beauty of those embedded routines and activities.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult sometimes to find like the magic one, like which one really is going to work this week for you, because sometimes it changes. Like I can embed a strategy, you know, in this routine this week, but then I tried the next week and he wasn't having it. Like it wasn't something that I could do either. So it's really just figuring out like what works best for that family. But I think you were kind of talking a little bit about some of that joint planning. So that joint plan in the very beginning, and I think, you know, we just have to really think about how we're portraying this message to the family. Like, are we just coming at them with questions? And really the kinds of questions that we're asking, you know, it's so much better to sit down, you know, like check in, like, how are you doing? Because I think you're always building that relationship with the families. And that sounds like that's what your provider had for you. They had this great relationship where you were like, you know what, like, it's just a bad day for me today. And so then you can really, you know, explore some of like, this is, you know, like what we worked on last time. These are kind of your concerns. Some things that I always like to do is bring up the outcomes. Like, these are what your outcomes are right now, you know, too. And then see, you know, like what's been hard for you this week and really talk about it and have the conversation, but not in a like walking in the door, like, hey, like, what do you want to do today? What were you just doing?
Exactly. I appreciated the provider that we had that came into our home. I really appreciated how much she said what she noticed. So I noticed that, you know, you're orienting yourself this way, and can you tell me more about that? Or I noticed that he tends to blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me why you think that is? And so starting with observations, and that kind of sets the tone. We don't even need to ask the question, what do you want to work on? It doesn't have to be that formal. It's just you naturally kind of fall into what you're going to do for that day. But starting with observations, there was no pressure. There was no question. She wasn't asking me to do any brain work. She was telling me something and then following up with a very little question, like, why do you think he's doing that? Or what could that be for? Or can you tell me more about it?
And I love that she made you reflect on it. Like, she could give you that reflection back. So you had to reflect on it and be like, like, oh, this is why. So you're bringing your knowledge and expertise.
Right, exactly. And it takes such a finesse. I think this, you know, my his physical therapist has been doing it for years and years and years, 30 years probably. And so to have that level of natural conversation building, I think it's something to aspire to, especially as a provider. But the other thing that I really think I'm going to start doing more of is taking time, a good chunk of time, to helping the parent identify and share with me what their learning style is, so that I can tailor my service provision to how they process and retain information.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially because you said in the very beginning, you were like, I wish I wrote that down. Like, I wish that I had like this information, like I would like text it to myself just so I have it. So like you obviously like really need things visually. Like, you want that report, like you want to write down all the things that you talked about so that way you can go back and reflect on them later.
Look at it. Yeah.
Yes. And so some parents might want like an audio recording, like that they can play back, you know, later.
Yeah. And even deeper than like remembering it after the session, like doing it during the session, because when I think back to the second section of the indicator summary process, when we're talking about how do they acquire and use knowledge and skills. And it makes me think, when I explain that to families as we're going through the decision tree, I'll read the whole thing and I'm like, this is what we're looking for. Basically, we're trying to see how your child processes things that are going on around him, and what does he do with that information? How does he learn from it? How does he bring you into things that he's learning? How does he remember what he's learned? So thinking about those questions when we're talking with adults and using the adult learning principles, I think is really useful, because we can say, okay, me showing you a video, do you learn better that way? Or do you learn better from me taking your hand and showing you how to do it? Or do you learn better from me writing you a bullet list? Like, how would you like to process this information?
Right.
Do you need to watch me and your husband do it? Or, you know what I mean? Like, so in the actual session, having that information available, this parent learns best by XYZ, can make it more meaningful, but also more retainable.
Right. Well, yeah, absolutely. I had a family before and she loved Post-it notes. she was a big fan of Post-it notes. And so we would practice a strategy, but then, so like if we were working on like him saying night night, then over by in his room, we would put a Post-it note by his light switch that would kind of give her that visual cue, like, oh yes, like this is, I'm going to implement this strategy now. And so that was something that she thrived on, and it was really helpful for her and beneficial versus not having that Post-it note there for her. So I love that you're thinking about how is it that the parents learning, like how can we really best support you? And
it might be a question that they've never been asked and they've never considered before. And so by you giving them that opportunity or that space to kind of, oh, how do I learn best? Well, I remember the grocery list by whatever, you know what I mean? It kind of, it's a skill that they can take with them even when their child ages out of the program, so that they can continue to learn new ways to support them.
Right. And be aware of that. Yeah. And I love that you said that they can take with them. So like, even when they transition out of early intervention, they can say, hey, like, this is how I can learn best. Like, I know like this works well for me. If you don't mind kind of like catering your teaching in this way to me. That's great. Oh, I remember like one thing that you said before, and I want to kind of like go a little bit deeper. You kind of mentioned it, but I want to go a little bit deeper in it. So before you told me, and you talked about how you were always wondering whether or not you chose the right thing to do. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So did I choose the right thing to do? In my mind, I'm processing it as, am I spending this time in a way that is the shortest path to his success and thriving? So, or did I go around my, elbow type thing? Am I using this gift that I've been given, the services, in the best way? So like, am I being a good steward of my resources is really how I boil it down. But I think it's coming from a place of, I just want to do best by him. I've worked really hard to get these services to, whatever. And I want to use them to the best of my ability to be effective. And so I think it comes from also a place of insecurity or doubt. I don't know what the next step is. Like, I think I do. I think I've got it, but you're the expert. And we hear that all the time. Like, you're the expert. You tell me what's going to come next. Yes, you tell me what comes next. You're the child development expert. And I totally understand that now. I mean, before having kids, before going through this program, I was like, no, but you're the expert on your child. And that's true. But there's still this feeling of, but I want to use your time and my time to get us on the shortest path to him getting better.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think it's, like parents don't always like being called the expert. I think that as a parent, you have this intuition and you have this knowledge that I would never have as a provider. Like, I can't tell you why I think your son is always doing that. You might have a better insight because you see it a lot more and you're like, oh, please, like, he's fine. He's just being dramatic. Or like, no, he's really hungry. Like, he gets hangry, like, you have like that knowledge and that insight that I don't have, that might change and shift the way that we do things or what they look like in the moment based off of that reflection. But I like that, you're kind of talking about it like, I don't know all the time. But how is it that like maybe what we're doing is we're not explaining, enough too. I think sometimes parents don't get that explanation. Like, this is why we would do this. This is why we would do that. Because in the reality of things, like if you choose an activity or like a routine, like that you want to work on, like, oh, I really want to work on like going up and down the stairs versus I want to work on going outside. So those are two different choices that maybe like you might make, and you might like, I don't know which one is stairs going to get me to a shorter path, but ultimately, like we know, like neither one might not get you to a shorter path. They just are the same thing in different ways. And maybe that's the explanation that we have to give parents sometimes too.
Yeah. And I think that you hit it right on the head too, because what I'm looking for is, how did you make your decision? I need you to walk me through how you chose what we should do. Was it because that, well, if he can do stairs, then going outside is not going to be an issue. So let's work on the stairs, because that's like killing two birds with one stone, that type of thing. Like, I need you to work as my provider, walk me through that process so that I can replicate it on my own, so that I can learn to deduct, or, and do, I don't know what the word is.
Like, kind of like analyze the situation.
Yeah, analyze it on my own, so that I don't have to ask you this question. I don't have to defer to you. I want to get better, but I need you to kind of show me how you're doing it, especially as it relates to, linear development. Like, things, they have to develop in a certain order. And so I need to know what exactly is that, because I know broad information. I know what I can find on the internet. I know what's on my CDC app. Yeah. But, I need you to tell me, well, your muscle develops like this, and you actually don't have a kneecap. And so with, that nitty gritty stuff, because then I can be like, okay, those are things I need to, that I need to just kind of keep in my toolbox as ways. I love that. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great strategy too. Like, really, tell me about your thought process. Like, what is it that you're thinking? What would be the benefits of doing this over this? And that might help really steer your decision. Then you're like, oh, wait, hold on. Like, I want to do this because this is something we do a lot more. Like, or you might have chose something before that you don't do as frequently, and you're like, and then they come back the next week. Like, how did that go? You're like, oh, I didn't do it.
Yeah, well, we just didn't have a chance to. Yeah. And I think starting off services more guided, like, I was thinking as a provider, I'm thinking that we start off this thing because I heard you say XYZ and I noticed XYZ. So that helped me come to this determination. What are your thoughts? Totally open to suggestions. To a family that's been in the program 3 months, 6 months, they might come, well, I thought since he's been really into that game, I thought we could practice this fine motor activity because he's going to be interested in it anyways. Right. And then they've just told you their thought process. But it took a little bit of guiding at first. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love that idea though. And I think you're right though, too. I think parents, they're not sure in the very beginning, they're not sure what it's going to look like. And so they might need a little bit more of that explanation throughout. This is kind of like what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. And then by the time they get to 6 months, they're going to be like, hey, I'm ready. This is what I have planned out. I really want to do this, or I would love, this has been a really hard challenge for him this week. Do you mind if we focus on this today? And so it starts to come a lot more natural, but that's really the point, is because we want to ultimately build that parent's capacity, especially when they transition out of services, because we want them to be able to advocate for themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the ultimate goal. So is there anything else that you want to say about coaching before I go to my very last question?
No. I just had great coaches, and I hope that one day I can be as good as everyone combined.
Yeah, I know. And I love
that's the ultimate goal.
Don't you love how you could pick out certain things? I love how she asks those reflective questions, and she's able to pause with me. And I love how, she gives me these explanations, I want to pull this and this and put it
she notices everything, and she's so kind, and she always affirms me, and you just try to get to best practices.
Well, I think, we have so many great early interventionists in the field. It's just, we're always learning. This is a continuous learning process, no matter how long you've been in the field. You're always picking up something new, which that's the beautiful part of it too.
Yeah. And I think it's so nice that that's how parenting is too. And a lot of us are parents. And so there's a nice parallel there too with the providers. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. So this is how I would love to end. What tips would you give other early interventionists providing services to families?
I think we've kind of talked about several of the things I had floating in my brain. I think pausing is a big thing. Giving the space, and
so go a little bit more in detail about the pausing too.
So asking the question and then pausing so that the parent can answer without resist the urge to answer, but also don't have an answer in mind. Just try to do your best to clear your mind of, I'm asking this guided question, this led question, because that might not be what the parent is thinking at all. And then, like we said earlier, pause and see how you can help the parent have that space and that time to think. So if that means, helping the baby pull out a toy that she's getting frustrated with or whatever, so that the parent can process.
Yeah. And I love that tip too, because we talk about pausing all the time with children that we teach parents that, like, just pause, like, give them some time to process it before we like jump in and respond. And so we tell them, like, wait 10 seconds. And it's something that's hard for any adult to do, but we teach parents, like, this is how to do it. But then we have a hard time, and we don't really think about doing it with other adults, right? Like, we ask them questions, like, we just think, oh, like, you're not responding fast enough. Like, I'm just going to jump in and give you an answer versus waiting. But what's going through your head? Like, what was going through your head when they were asking you questions?
Just, am I saying the right thing? Am I answering the way that they want me to answer? Is this going to make me look dumb? Is this the best use of our time? Just any number of things. Or sometimes I'm just thinking like, I can't even remember the question. Can you repeat it? Like, the baby was crying and why are we staring at each other? Did you ask me a question? So any number of things. I remember one time I had just gotten the worst news of my life, come from a doctor's appointment, picked the baby up, went to therapy, and it just so happened that we had just done a training on reflective questions and all that. And so we were all trying to use reflective questions, and I was like, I don't know. I just don't. I have nothing in my brain. There's nothing there. And I wasn't in a place to answer any of those types of questions, but she made it so that I could, because she realized that question was too big. I took too long. She did give me space. She did give me time. She did occupy my son for a few seconds. And then she asked me, would you like me to kind of rephrase that? And I just love her so much. She also said, is it okay if I pop in, like, to my thoughts? And I was just like, yes, please. Can I try that a different way? And she was talking about the way that she could help me process without saying, well, let's think about it like this. Well, let's try that, without giving me the answer. She was genuinely trying to get me to think about it, because motivational interviewing says if it's your idea, you will follow through and you'll remember it. And so she used that, and it was just wonderful. But it took probably a good 10, 15 minutes out of our session. But you know what? That, as a provider, you're like, oh my God, now I only have 30 minutes left, and how are we going to do all this? That's probably one of the most valuable chunks of services with her that I will ever remember, was the fact that she let me come to my own answer. And she accepted the answer. She wasn't like, yeah, well, that's not quite what I was going for. Like, that was as good as answer as any, And so people notice those responses to their input. I think that's another thing too, is make sure you kind of monitor your responses to parents' input.
Well, it sounds like she has really created this safe space for you. So you are able to openly reflect and not feel criticized or feel judged or feel like she has any like ill thoughts towards any kind of answer that you could give her. So I love that, you said like she's completely just respected anything that you said, and that her cues that she gave off, her nonverbal cues, always showed that she accepted it. And that's something it's hard, to do as a provider. Like, we have to make sure that we're aware of our nonverbal cues and the messages that we're conveying to our families. So I like that tip. So we're going to pause for families. If really you don't know what's going on with the family and they're really taking a long time, ask to reframe it. Would you like me to reframe this question for you? Or would you like me to try to ask it in a different way? To see, because they might feel like you, like, I just can't today. Like, I'm not spot on. Like, today's
like, I don't know why I didn't just cancel. And you don't know that either. Like, I don't think she ever knew, but yeah, you just don't know what you're up against.
She did a great job, and she recognized, that.
Yeah.
That's a great tip. Any other tips that you would say?
Asking them how they learn. And then I think also also using lots of affirmations. Like, you would be surprised how much. I'm a pretty secure person. I'm pretty confident in what I know. I'm confident in my parenting, and I need a lot of affirmation.
Yeah.
Like, all of the above are true. And I think it's like, it's so easy to see a confident mama, a confident daddy, and say, okay, yeah, they got this in the bag. They're good. They're my low maintenance family. Even still, you need to be providing affirmations. You need to confirm their ideas and kind of walk with them like on a personal level too, because it's just as much personal as it is professional and therapeutic and that type of thing. So, and I think sometimes that's the best way to get really good rapport built and really good results, and all the things that we're looking for, progress. I think starting with what they need personally in order to feel empowered sometimes can just be, you got it. Like, you are on top of it. Your baby. Oh my gosh. I
And
would have
being
never picked
specific.
up. What's that?
And being specific, like in
Yeah,
your
being very
affirmation.
specific. Yeah. I love how you picked him up and cuddled him really quick. That's exactly what it seemed like he needed. Or, you were so gentle with him. Wow, I love how creative you are. I mean, pick up on things that you feel they're putting a lot of effort into and praise them rather than saying, how about if we try XYZ? That's helpful. But sometimes just acknowledging what they're doing so right is just as helpful, if not more, because that's going to stick out in their brain.
I love that. That's such a great tip. Like, just because you forget about those, you forget about, like, just making those small affirmations too. And I think too, like, I always love talking about the little baby like steps that I've seen their child make, that baby progress, because they see their child all the time and they don't notice it. And so even if it's been a week, I'm like, oh, like, look what he's doing now. Like, that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
Like, what happened? How did he start doing this? And then they're like, oh, I didn't even notice, because it's just something they don't always pick up on because you're with your child all the day, all the time, right?
Or, you must have been really working on XYZ, or, the whole family must have been pitching in, or, whatever. Like, whatever you feel like is going to resonate with them. I feel like it's important to recognize, like, what is something that they're clearly putting effort into, and just praise it. Because that's where their focus is, obviously.
Yes, I love it. Any other tips? Or, I know you talked to your husband too. Did any other last tips from him?
Yeah, we had a fun time talking about it last night. So he's been really involved in this whole process from like the we split therapy, and he came to all the assessments and stuff like that. And one thing that he said was that he really valued that they included him just as much, and he's hard of hearing too. So when people know that, they always talk to me. And they didn't. They knew that, and they didn't. And I think, like, recognizing that the dads are just as an important part of this, and that they have just as many thoughts, and they have just as many concerns, and sometimes parents are different, but a lot of people defer to mom, and I think sometimes that really hurts dad's feelings. And also, I think he was empowered a little bit too. Like, I'm dad, and I can tell you guys what I want him to be doing just as much as she can.
I have a voice. Yeah. And my voice is just as important, which I think, working from birth to 3, like, that's an important message to convey to fathers and any other caregivers that are in that child's life. Like, we want to make sure that we're making them feel empowered from the very beginning. Like, we want you to be actively involved. And I mean, I think that's a really great tip to thank him for that, because it's probably something that we tend to always forget. Like, how can we, include dad in the next visit? How can we, include your husband? Would he like to be included in the next visit? Is there anybody else that's immediate in your family that's around your child that you would like us to include too, or that can be a part of it and engage with us? Like, I think, just exploring those and having those conversations and thinking about it would be great.
Yeah. And monitoring assumptions too, like if dad's not present, Like, I don't think anybody ever thought anything other than he's working really hard for our family, or, there's not, oh, he's not an involved dad.
Right.
And I think on some level, he was probably subconsciously expecting that, which kind of says a lot about the way that we treat and view dads in our culture. So that I think was like, he was actually kind of surprised that it wasn't the case, which made me think I really need to be cognizant of how I treat dads and how I engage and pull them in and, that type of thing.
Right. Well, and especially too, like if we're, texting or emailing with permission of the agency, of course, but if we're doing anything like that, that we're including both
parents,
in those.
Whoever wants to be included. Yeah.
Yes. Whoever wants to be included. If it's, grandma, that's always, over and watching him too. Like anybody that wants to be included, because I think that is important. And that's a great way to make sure that everybody's teaming together and everyone's on the same page and receiving the same information too. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful tip. Well, that's a great one to wrap up with. Do you have any last minute words? Anything else?
The thoughts are coming in as we go, so I'll let you know.
It's so fantastic.
I mean, it's a process, and we're so lucky that we're still in the program, and so I can't wait. It has been truly a blessing to my service provision, but also I think to me as a parent, like obviously it's so helpful, but for me to feel like, yeah, we're good. This is where I'm surrounded. This is my village. I'm so happy that the programs like these are out there, because sometimes you just feel like you can't do it without them. I know that's our goal, is to work ourselves out of a job, but from a mommy,
a support team.
Yeah, it's nice to have some ears to bounce ideas off of and hearts to walk alongside, and
right,
all the good things.
Yes. I love it, Michaela. Like, this has just been so great. Like, I feel like I've learned a lot from you. And so I'm just so thankful. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with all of us and putting it all out there. I appreciate it. Please thank your husband too, because yes, we definitely don't want to forget about those fathers either. And we want to make sure they feel included and empowered, like he said.
Yes. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of share on this platform too. I'm excited.
Yes. Well, thank you so much.